Welcome to the latest episode of Climate Pioneers featuring innovators changing the face of corporate sustainability. I'm Heather Clancy, the editor at large with Trellis. Today's guest was the first chief sustainability officer for two very influential organizations, the US government and Google, where she just celebrated her 10th work anniversary. She's been CSO for the last 7 of those years. I am pleased to welcome Kate Brandt. Hello, Kate.
Hi, great to be with you.
It's super to have you. I'm not sure where you are today, but wherever
I'm
you
in San
are,
Francisco. Yes.
awesome. Okay. Well, I'm across the country waving at you. Um, so call the first section of this interview like the getting to know you section.
Mhm.
And I peeked at your resume and your background, and I noticed that you were educated in like international relations. So what got you into climate and sustainability issues in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, my interest in these issues goes back even earlier than my education. I grew up not far from San Francisco in Muir Beach, where I was very close to Muir Woods, the National Monument, and spent a lot of time outside and have always felt a really deep connection to the natural world. So that's really where my interest stemmed from. And then as I, went through college and graduate school, I was really fascinated by the role of natural resources in peace and conflict in international relations. And so did a lot of study of, the role of water in conflict, of, superpowers and the relationships that they developed with faraway countries to get access to agricultural land or other natural resources. So that was sort of where a lot of my initial academic interest came from. And then when I was in graduate school and many years ago, took a class on climate negotiations when that was a very new and growing field. So it's always been an area of interest for me, kind of personally and academically.
So you must have a lot of thoughts on climate migration issues.
Indeed, which is
Mm,
very real, and I think
mm,
unfortunately we'll see a lot more of that in the coming decades.
right. Well, as I referenced, you were the first CSO for the government, federal government, in the Obama administration. Did you lobby for that position? Like, what was your reaction to being named to that role?
So I helped to create the position. So I was
You
originally
wrote your job.
appointed. Yes, I was originally appointed in 2014 into a role called the Federal Environmental Executive, which is a
hmm
position that was first created in the Clinton administration under the EPA to get recycled content paper into federal government operations. And over time, the role grew and evolved and moved to the White House. And so when I came into that role, I was absolutely standing on the shoulders of many people who had served in that role previously, including in the Obama administration. But as it was 2014, we were sort of coming towards the end of that second term. I saw an opportunity to write an executive order that was a 10-year federal sustainability strategy. So that was sort of projecting forward to the next 10 years. Where did we want the federal government to go in terms of clean energy procurement, adoption of electric vehicles, sustainable procurement practices? And in the course of doing that, I met with a lot of corporate sustainability officers, a newer role in that time, over a decade ago, and really thought it would make sense to evolve and expand this position that I was sitting in to be the federal chief sustainability officer. And so I wrote that into the executive order, and then I got to become the first one.
How did you, just out of curiosity, like what was your most favorite achievement out of that EO?
I mean, I think it was the long-term vision, particularly around utilizing the federal government's procurement power. If you think about this over a decade ago, this was early days of supplier engagement and even companies, setting scope 3 targets for themselves. And the federal government is a massive procurer of, many different products and services. And so I did work through the executive order and just in that time around engaging with any federal supplier with whom the government did over $1 billion of work and starting to ask them specific questions and doing a scorecard around who had climate targets, who was disclosing their carbon footprint. And then that was expanded upon later around some climate resilience metrics. So I'm really proud of a lot of things that are in that EO. I think it holds up really well, but I think the engagement with the supplied base of the federal government was really innovative at that time.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, about your current reflection on that. I don't want to make you get political, but
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on the current moment?
Yeah, there is not currently someone sitting in that chair.
No, there
In
was.
the
Yep. Mhm.
previous, that there has been someone in that role in both in the Trump administration and in the Biden administration. So we will see if that role gets filled. But I think we've seen ups and downs in terms of the federal government's work on its own sustainability. But some of the work is sustained. The executive order that I wrote that President Obama signed in 2015 was repealed, but it was actually replaced with another EO that didn't quite have the same level of ambition, but I think still recognized that even from a government efficiency perspective, a lot of this work is necessary. So I'll be curious to see what happens if someone comes into that chair and sort of what the policies look like. But I was heartened to see that a lot of the work was sustained, even with a slightly different orientation.
Okay. So what led you into the private sector?
Yeah, so in fact, it was really the work on this executive order and speaking with chief sustainability officers. I was starting to think about what was going to be next for me and thinking about what were other platforms where I could have the same scale of impact that I was able to have in that role at the White House. The US government is the single largest user of energy in the world. We were talking about its massive, billion-dollar procurement power. And so as I started to look at other platforms, others opportunities for impact, I really early on in that journey met the team at Google and learned about the company's really longstanding commitment to this space. And I've always been very connected to technology and innovation. I worked at the Department of Energy before I was at the White House, looking at the opportunity to pull through basic research through the applied programs to deploy technology out into the world. And it just felt like a great fit for me and a place that I could both really learn a lot, but also contribute my skills from having operated in such a large organization, and just staying close to the technology and innovation. It was very exciting to me and remains so to this day.
So what advice would you give to like a public sector employee or someone in your similar position that's considering a corporate role, like advice on how to approach that?
Yeah. One thing that I have observed in my work in the public and the private sector is there needs to be deep collaboration. And that's something I've focused on a lot at Google. And we've built a lot of tools for the public sector, be that, for traffic engineers in cities or work around, how do we do climate modeling and many other tools and solutions that we've built with the public sector in mind. And I find that people who have that facility and fluency in working in both dimensions and then thinking creatively about how do you bring together the public and private sector, whether that's around policy, whether that's around innovation, partnerships. So I would sort of advise people that it's really healthy and really productive for people to have career experiences in both realms and then to really use those unique insights to advance the public private partnership that I think is really critical.
Yeah. So quite a bit has changed since you joined 10 years ago to Google. And you have a goal that is a real moonshot. I know you use that language.
Yeah.
Net zero by 2030 through a combination of operational changes, purchases of 24/7 carbon-free energy, and investments in carbon removal. Um, as we've discussed, though, the
Yeah.
AI growth is
Mhm.
really putting pressure on that. Your emissions have grown 51% since the 2019 baseline year. So, commend you for being committed. Why are you still committed to that original goal?
Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate your picking up on the moonshot framing that we've put against this work, which is really in keeping with how Google has approached many hard problems historically. Things like self-driving cars, were truly moonshots and now have become much more of a reality, right? So this is a long-standing way that we as a company, we often like to say we like hard problems. This is a long-standing way that we have driven innovation. And I think kind of the tie that binds all these moonshots together, whether it's net zero or self-driving cars or the many other, solve how do we better detect breast cancer using AI, right? These really big challenges that we've taken on that have societal benefit attached to them. The point isn't necessarily a check the box or 100% achievement. It's sort of inherently meant to be hard, to drive us to try new things, to find unusual partnerships, to innovate. So I do think that for us, this moonshot pushes us to be bold, to try, new approaches and to continue making progress where we can, and also frankly to be really open around where our challenges lie. And I know we got to have a conversation a few weeks ago before our report came out, and we do have areas where we're making tremendous progress, even in spite of the growth of our footprint, the need for electricity to power our data centers. Our data center energy emissions are down 12%. So that's, I think, a real testament to how this kind of sustained work towards a moonshot enables us to drive progress, while also really highlighting for us where we still have challenges. We still have real challenges in our value chain and getting access to more clean energy in the Asia Pacific region. But our ability to pinpoint those challenges, to share them and to say, these are shared challenges, right? Even a company like Google can't solve these things alone. So for us, it's about that sustained work, sustained innovation, and sustained partnership to keep driving towards the moonshots.
Mm-hmm. Who do you report to?
My boss is named Ben Gomes, who's
Right.
a longtime Google leader and has run many, different engineering teams inside the company for 25 years, including Google Search. And he is now our chief technologist for both learning and for sustainability. And I've loved my partnership with him because he is an engineering leader, a technologist, very close to the innovation that Google has been driving throughout its 25 plus year history. And we've been such a complementary team in that way because I come from the public sector, have this kind of deep background in sustainability and operational sustainability, and have really stretched into the product world. And so it's been a really fantastic collaboration with him.
So how do you work with, like, as I go back to that moonshot goal, how do you work with other executives to like plan and challenge and to also like reconfirm that goal? Like, I'm sure that you had to justify not changing that.
Yeah, the way that I've really approached this is in this moment where, we have been an AI first company since 2017, and we're really in a moment now of how do we develop AI in a bold and responsible way. And I really see the work that we do on sustainability as being squarely within that mission. In the sense of it being bold, it's about how do we unlock the power of AI as a major environmental and solution for nature. All the work that we're doing around reducing emissions through solutions for energy, through transportation, for agriculture, all the work that we're doing to help in better prediction of climate crisis events like flooding and wildfire. These are major applications of AI that show its benefit to society, its benefit to people, and its benefit to the planet. So there's that component of it. And then additionally, from the responsible management of AI perspective, people are rightfully interested in the environmental footprint of AI. So the more that we can do to become as efficient as possible in our data center infrastructure, and the hardware that we're running the AI on, and how we're training the models, then of course the procurement of carbon-free energy, the work we're doing on water stewardship, these are all really essential components to what it means to responsibly manage AI. So I think when I have conversations with our leadership, I really orient the discussion in that way, that this work is really squarely within the company's mission, within our objective to be both bold and responsible in how we deploy AI. And I think that really resonates.
I want to go to those applications in a moment. A couple more questions are sort of on the other positions you have. So like obviously energy and carbon removal investments, significant effort over the years.
Yeah.
How will they be impacted by the new budget? Are you going to have to adjust some stuff given the new incentive structures and some of the realities of that budget?
Yeah. I mean, what I would say is the sheer scale of AI's growth, means that we know we're going to need more power, right? And I think there's been a robust dialogue happening around this topic, as there should be. And we see solving this as really, again, one of the biggest moonshots that we're all collectively working on in this space. And I think the good news is that energy, this challenge, it's an execution challenge. It's not a physical barrier. The solutions exist. Many of them need to be scaled. They need to come down the cost curve. But we see alignment with the work that we've been doing around, new advanced energy solutions like fusion, advanced geothermal, advanced nuclear technologies that are still aligned with what we're seeing, from this administration, from what has remained in the bill. So I think there are absolutely areas where there's a lot of constructive opportunity to partner, to work together, to unlock these clean, firm solutions that we're absolutely going to need moving forward. And then I think, frankly, the rest remains to be seen. I think we will have to see what the implications are of some of the other measures. And then, we and everyone else will need to adjust accordingly. But I think it's still a little bit too early to fully understand some of the implications.
Fair. So how do the US is just one country and you're a multinational. So how do you look at other regions then outside the US? Like, where do you see the most greenfield opportunity right now and why?
Yes. So I mentioned a little bit at the beginning of the conversation,
Asia
the
Pac.
challenge that we face in the Asia Pacific region. Exactly. And that's both because we have our own footprint there. We operate data centers in the APAC region, but also a lot of our suppliers are operating there as well. So this is a huge greenfield opportunity. It's a challenge, but therefore a really large opportunity for us. And so we've really been trying to take a very holistic approach of, working with our suppliers, requesting that they sign a clean energy addendum to work towards 100% renewable energy, and also trying to support the broader ecosystem. So, creative vehicles for financing new clean energy in the region. We teamed up with BlackRock several months ago on a gigawatt solar portfolio in Taiwan, which we will get some of the access to that portfolio for ourselves, but it will also be made available for our suppliers. We're also really bullish on solar in India. We saw last year 1 million solar jobs were created in India. And so a real opportunity there, I think, not only to be a purchaser of solar in India, but even to support the solar industry. We have a tool called the Solar API, which enables solar developers to more easily, understand the orientation of rooftops, their shading, help more quickly deploy rooftop solar. And so we've been investigating, what would it take to bring a solution like that to India, where solar is not building integrated. It's often on more of like a lattice, sort of like an extra structure that's not the roof. And so what would it take for us to optimize a solution like Solar API for a region like India? So anyway, just to say, I think lots of opportunities in APAC. We've also done work to help map geothermal resources, which could be very valuable, especially in land-constrained geographies. So really leaning in there, and I'm excited to see us make more progress in the region in the coming years.
And I think you sneakily just gave me 2 great examples of how you're using AI.
I did. And of course, yes. Indeed.
So let's go there. Let's go there. Because that is your, listen, like CSOs have the job to make their own organization more sustainable.
Yeah.
That's the job title. However, a growing focus of your role is how do you help Google use AI to help cities and businesses and researchers and others harness this stuff for environmental good. I'll just say it that way. I know you have a specific goal, help others reduce 1 gigaton of emissions. So what's the business opportunity here? Like, and did I mischaracterize that?
No, you're exactly right. So the aspiration that we have is to enable individuals and cities and other partners to collectively reduce a gigaton of carbon equivalent
Hmm.
emissions annually by 2030. That's roughly,
Annually. Okay.
yeah,
Mm.
2030 and annually. And that's roughly equivalent to the emissions of Japan. So again, speaking of moonshots, like very bold aspiration of what we want to enable. And to your point, yes, of course, in my role in our strategy, we're deeply focused on the work starts at home with our operations, with our value chain. But we believe our opportunity extends far beyond our four walls of our business and our value chain. It's really about how do we unlock technology, especially AI, as a solution. And so the gigaton is an aspiration oriented around impact. And we've been building a portfolio of solutions to really help drive towards that aspiration. And so that's exactly like what I was just sharing with you, the solar API, of course, our Nest Learning thermostat that's helping people save energy and money at home on their utility bills. Also, things like fuel efficient routing in Google Maps that's enabling drivers to choose the most fuel efficient route if it isn't already the fastest one. And so, just 5 of our products, including those 3 I just mentioned, in 2024 enabled our users and partners to reduce 26 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent from their own footprint. That's like 3.5 million US homes, their energy use would be like the equivalent of reducing that energy use for a year. And also to put it into context, that's more than double our own footprint in that same year. So we're already seeing huge opportunities to drive that kind of positive change, and we need to keep going. And then furthermore, we see AI as a very powerful tool when it comes to climate resilience and adaptation. So we've been building solutions that are really geared towards helping communities become more resilient. So this is tools like FireSat, which is a constellation of satellites, of which we've launched the first one so far with our partners, which when built out would be able to detect wildfires in 20-minute increments when they're just the size of a classroom. So much earlier, much faster detection of wildfires, which of course is powerful from a resilience perspective, but also a huge amount of emissions come from wildfires. So that's really an adaptation and resilience solution. And then similarly, flooding. Riverine flooding is a major cause of, unfortunately, death and major economic loss globally. So we've built through our Google research team a global hydrologic model that enables us to predict riverine flooding 7 days in advance. And that enables people to get out of harm's way, even aid organizations to give aid ahead of flooding events. So solutions like this we see are also very powerful,
Hmm.
all AI enabled and helping us to adapt to the implications we're already seeing from climate change.
So do you have specific revenue goals you're tasked with helping meet?
Not explicitly. The way that we look at, something like the gigaton is it's a portfolio that is optimized for impact, but of course
Hmm.
we are ideally finding double bottom line opportunities within that portfolio. And we often will find that even within a certain solution, we can both create a revenue generating line of products and give away data for free that doesn't lend itself well. And a really nice example of that is our work around contrails abatement. So these are those white plumes you see behind jets in the sky. They're causing radiative forcing. They're causing heat to be trapped in the atmosphere. They represent about a third of aviation's climate impact. So that's about 1% of all global warming impact. And so we've initially teamed up with airlines like American Airlines and air systems operators like Eurocontrol to use AI to help them better understand what are the conditions under which contrails will form, because it has to do with elevation and time of day and air temperature, and then to reduce them by more than half. So that's a very powerful tool, and one in which we can both offer that as a service to airlines, to air systems operators, but also through Google.org, through our philanthropic arm at Google, we were able to found a new nonprofit called contrails.org that's helping to translate a lot of that research into tools for the aviation industry that will be made available for free. So that's a really nice example of how we look at revenue and impact together and sort of finding creative structures that allow us to do both effectively and, of course, therefore scale the impact even further.
How do you account for the potentially negative impacts of AI? So, like, we know that it can be used to grow fossil fuels exploration as an example. How do you make sure that Google's AI is not used for that purpose?
Yeah. So, as you may be aware, we have a position that through our Google Cloud business that we will not use AI for upstream oil and gas applications, for custom built upstream oil and gas applications. So, that's sort of an explicit position that we've taken. But really, a lot of the work is more oriented around not the negative screen, but the positive application. So, having things like our gigaton aspiration enables us to align product areas across the company from Google Research to Google DeepMind, Cloud, and other teams around the opportunity space, around utilizing this technology as a climate solution. So that is more the orientation of the work and sort of how we look at, addressing that.
So, one last question on this theme, and it's, this was not part of your job when you became CSO. So, how is this focus on help, again, using these ideas to create an opportunity for the company, to create a growth opportunity? How has that changed the nature of your role? How are you prioritizing your time?
Yeah. This has been my vision from the outset. When I came to Google, we were already such pioneers in things like clean energy procurement, going all the way back to 2010. And frankly, we have very early examples of products in this space. Tools like Google Earth Engine have been around for 2 decades. Google Earth, also very longstanding solution, Nest thermostats. So there, we were already certainly looking for these opportunities. But what I was really able to do as we put that gigaton aspiration together was to really align our leadership around having a more explicit vision and moonshot around this work. And it was, I think very well received, and it enabled me to start, a product manager team, a PM team within my organization that drives our sustainability product strategy. And for me to really lean in with our product areas on building these solutions. And we're so fortunate that we have tremendous leaders working on this. And it's really showing results, as we've been talking about, from an impact perspective, from approving out these very positive use cases for AI, on building solutions that our customers are looking for. We've done such interesting work with Earth Engine, for example, and supporting, large CPG customers who are trying to limit deforestation, helping them understand where deforestation is taking place, helping them predict where it might take place. So we found so much synergy within our own product strategy, our unique capabilities in sectors like transportation and energy, and also in meeting customer and user demand. So there's been so much great synergy as we've really expanded this work. But it was in the DNA, going back, like I said, 20 years with Earth Engine.
Okay, we have a couple minutes left. I want to ask some leadership questions. First
Great.
one is actually a very specific one. I've heard you describe yourself as both impatient and optimistic in a recent interview. I'm just curious how you balance those point of views, especially right now as you communicate, right? It's tough to communicate this sort of strategy right now. How do you balance that?
Yeah, I mean, one of my big reflections this year and what I've really sought to do and what we've sought to do from a communications perspective is expand the aperture of how we talk about this work. Obviously, there's people like you and me who think in terms of metric tons of CO2. But there's a much broader set of people who are interested in the health implications of air quality or of wildfire, or who need to save money and are interested in fuel efficient routing or Nest learning thermostats because they will save them, cents on the dollar. So for me, it's been really about how do we expand the aperture of how we talk about this work, how it's benefiting people, how it's benefiting the planet. So that's been a really big insight for me. And then also something that I've really sought to do a lot more of is just to share more about my personal why and to connect on a more heart level with people. We can get very heady and scientific and technical, which we should, and I will do that all day long. But equally, I think it's really important to share, why do we care about this? Why is this so meaningful for me? That's my 4-year-old daughter. That's the community I live in out in the redwood trees, that's very exposed to wildfire risk. It's the future that our kids are going to inherit. And I also find that that's really important in terms of how we talk about this work, not only the technical and the scientific, but the personal, the heart component of it.
So, what's the best way to rise above a no?
Yes. Well, as you can imagine, I've faced many no's in my career, but what I generally do is I try to understand the no. Like I try to really get to, okay, but why is this a no? And what would shift this from being a no? And are there ways to sort of substantively shift the solution, like find win-wins? I find so often that we can find really strong win-wins, like I've been sharing with you, where there's a product solution that meets a customer need that also has a sustainability benefit. So yeah, I try to get like underneath the no and say, okay, I understand it's a no, but
Okay.
what would change it to a yes? How do we get to
Okay.
that?
What's your biggest mistake and what did you learn from that mistake?
My biggest mistake has definitely been spreading myself too thin because I care about this work so much, because I am impatient to make progress. I've definitely had moments where I've taken on too much and I've sort of personally felt the impacts, like having a terrible back injury or getting really ill. So that's been my big lesson is you need to focus and you need to take care of yourself so you can really show up and do this work well.
Who do you consult for a reality check?
I am a really big fan of going outside. So I have a particular tree that I hike to most mornings, and I literally like sit on the ground and meditate with my tree. And
I'm
that's really
sorry
good
that
for
I'm
me.
not laughing. I just think I love that answer. Okay, so it's not a person, it's a tree.
It's the tree. I think his
Okay.
name is Bert.
Okay. What one question should anyone ask a potential new hire?
I love to ask people kind of on the same themes we've been discussing, what brings you to this work and sort of what keeps you motivated even on a hard day. And I find that's very telling.
I think I kind of already asked you this question, but maybe you'll have a different answer. How do you recharge your batteries?
Yes, I mean, certainly what I already shared, but also time with my family. I love being with my daughter outside, and she started hiking with me a lot. I also garden. I have a kitchen garden, and I love to, grow the food that I cook. And just connecting with like why I do this work and experiencing it in my daily life is really, recharging for me.
Yeah. What book should every sustainability professional read?
I love to read. This is a hard question for me, but I will give two if that's okay. One is The Solutionist by our friend Solitaire Townsend, which I think is an outstanding book. And I also really love Speed and Scale by John Doerr. I think those are both really, really excellent books.
Excellent. Okay. So, what advice would you give to a new CSO, especially in this chaotic
Yeah.
moment?
Yeah. I mean, I think in any moment, I would say really get to know your business partners. Kind of speaking of those win win opportunities, I think as CSOs, it really behooves us to embed our work within the business and to be part of the business strategy and not sort of feel like something that's disconnected or off to the side. So I think in any moment, I would say to do that. And then in this moment, I think it's really to get grounded in what is the long-term vision. This is a moment of a lot of turbulence, but if you can have those North Stars, those long-term visions, and again, back to how the work connects to the mission and the function of your business, I think that can create a lot of stability, even in moments where there's a lot of flux and change, where there's a lot of, variation in different geographies. So that's what I would advise.
Hmm. And one more. What would you tell your 21-year-old self?
Mm. Don't get discouraged. Always keep learning.
Right. Kate, I really appreciate you dropping by the studio. Thank you so much.
This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And thank you to our audience for watching the latest episode of Climate Pioneers.